I'm Carl Lanning, this is Brazos River Charter School, and it's time for This Week in History, specifically October 22nd, or 27th through November the 2nd. Let's see, well actually this week there's a lot of things going on. For example, just today, 1965, the completion of the tallest monument in the United States, the Gateway to the West, or the St. Louis Arch. 1920, the Volstead Act, that's what put teeth into Prohibition. You were arrested for prohibition, you were violating the Volstead Act. By the way, that's for medicinal alcohol that doctors could prescribe. But the elephant in the room for this week is obviously Halloween. That's the subject. However, due to its long, involved history, this really isn't the format to go through the history of Halloween. So I decided to try and go at it from the angle of where you and I have the closest contact with it, trick-or-treating. And there's actually something that's a little bit of a stroll down memory lane on our Facebook page, the Brazos River Charter School Facebook page, that I encourage you to take a look at, but more on that in just a little while. Let's see, well, Halloween trick-or-treating really started off more as tricks than treats. In the 1850s, we had large-scale Irish and Scottish immigration to the United States, and what you got were a lot of really fairly harmless general mischief things. Like, for example, the buggies being on top of the roof. Sometimes it might be livestock on the roof, a goat or a sheep or something, if you were living in country areas. There was always the stealing someone's garden gate and hanging it from a tree, or if you lived in town, it may be from a lamppost, something like that. But fairly harmless stuff. Switching signs on businesses in town. So you would take the sign from the barber shop and put it on the undertaker and vice versa. But generally fairly harmless stuff. At the turn of the 20th century, however, you started to get large-scale immigration to the United States. Urban centers were booming, and a lot of these were ethnicities that did not care for each other a whole lot, or religious differences. It turned violent. This is when you start to get rocks being thrown through windows. There was a report of a principal's house, I forgot where, I want to say it was in Cleveland, where one entire brick wall of his home was painted black. You get, for example, in Kansas City, in I believe it was 1900, someone greased the track of a trolley car, and as it was going downhill, obviously the conductor couldn't stop it. It hit a barrier, ejected the conductor, and he was killed. This is when police departments across the country really started to crack down on celebrating Halloween. In the 1920s is when we start to see the beginning of trick-or-treating the way we think about it today. These would be some costumes from the 20s, but it really didn't start to take off until the 1950s. And there would be some from the 1950s, which this relates to what I'm going to send you to on our Facebook page in a minute. Nobody knows exactly why, but it appears that a Donald Duck cartoon actually had a fairly big influence on the popularity of Halloween. Donald was celebrating Halloween the way we used to, with all kinds of little dirty tricks on his nephews. And so the witch, and I can't remember her name, puts a spell on Donald, and then he starts being nice and handing out candy. And it was in 1951, I believe it was, very, very popular cartoon. And that seems to be where you can really date the time that Halloween really starts to take off, but we're not really sure. What I did, as I mentioned on our Facebook page, is I put together a list of the most popular costumes and the most popular candy by decade. It's not an extensive list, it just lists some of the top ones, but I think you might find it a little bit interesting. Kind of a stroll down memory lane. Personally, I remember dressing up as Gilligan one particular Halloween. I had the white pants, I had white Converse All-Star shoes. I already had the Gilligan hat too, so I just got a red t-shirt that had SS Minnow put on it, and I was ready to go. Unfortunately, things like the lady down the street that used to fix homemade chocolate chip cookies or homemade brownies, that doesn't fly so much anymore, unfortunately. It's too bad too, because she was really, really good. The prize for the people who are most down on Halloween goes to our cousins across the water, the the British. According to a recent poll, 50% of those asked in the UK said that on Halloween they turn off all of the lights and pretend they're not home. So, if you happen to be handing out candy though, please be generous. Remember, dentists have boat payments to make. So we need to get those cavities growing. Anyway, as I said, please go to the Brazos River Charter School Facebook page and you'll see the list of costumes and candies by decade. I think you'll find it interesting. I found it to be a bit of a stroll down memory lane myself. Hope you enjoy that. And then we'll be back next week, and we'll go into space for one thing. We'll also see how many of you remember what this was all about as well. And I'll do some rope tricks with some really funny one-liners as well. Anyway, I'm Carl Lanning. This is Brazos River Charter School.